now introduce Lesson 8, which will have to do with vowel reduction in nouns, sigilate nouns, certain common monosyllabic words, and preposition mean. First of all, vowel reduction. There are certain rules for vowels in nouns that apply. And the basic rule is a rule having to do with propretonic comats and serae. That if you change a noun in such a way that a comats or a serae becomes propretonic, then they are going to reduce to schwa. Example would be the word prophet, navi. Well, if you want to make the word prophet plural, you'd add a hirik yod mem ending. And so with that full ending, you would get a navi'im with a comats in what will now be the propretonic position. So the tonic syllable will be the im ending. The pretonic syllable will be the v ending. But then this becomes propretonic. And the rule is that propretonic comats and serae reduce to schwa. Same thing with the word for word. So if you take davar and try to make it plural, you'll add a hirik yod mem, plural, masculine plural ending. But once you do that, the vowel will attach to the resh, and so you get a reem as the tonic syllable. The va will be pretonic, but then the comats here will be propretonic, and it must reduce to schwa. Same thing with the word for heart. The word for heart is levav, and it happens to be a feminine noun that shows up in the feminine plural. You add an ot ending, so you get a levavot, will be what you would expect to have. However, the vowel here will go with the last letter of the noun, so you get vote as the last syllable, the tonic syllable. Va would be the pretonic, but then the serae becomes propretonic, and according to the rule, it must reduce to schwa. So hearts in the plural would be levavot. That's the first rule of vowel reduction. Another rule of vowel reduction is this. If you have a pretonic serae and there is no vowel reduction in the propretonic syllable, then pretonic serae is likely to reduce to schwa. So here you have the word for judge, shofet. Add the hirik yod mem plural ending to get judges, so you would expect it to be shofetim. But because this serae has now become pretonic, it's the syllable before the accent, that serae must, and the sho, you have an unchangeably long vowel with the holem bav, and so the serae will reduce to schwa. Now this pretonic serae reduction is not as predictable as the propretonic comats and serae reduction, but it occurs often enough. So that's vowel reduction of comats and serae. Now let me introduce a new type of noun. The noun is called a sigilate noun. And it's a group of nouns that will have the accent receded, words like eretz and derek and kesef. In such nouns, the accent is not on the last syllable, but on the next to the last syllable. Most of these will have sigol as one of their vowels, often both vowels. So you get sigol, 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 sigol. Melech is another one, king. Segol, segol, or in some cases, sere, segol with sefer, which is book. Segol, segol with eved. And even with kodesh, you get a segol. However, if you have a guttural, it may show up as a vowels instead. So here you have na'ar, boy or lad or servant. And because of the guttural, ayans and most gutturals prefer a vowels, and so that influences the pattern to be a rather than e. But regardless of the vowels, it's the accent is receded. And the pattern that's going to follow is going to be the following pattern when you make these nouns plural. The thing that you'll do is that you'll take the consonants of the sigilate. In the case of Melech, king, you get the mem, the lamed, and the kaf. And you write the mem, lamed, and kaf, add the hirik yod mem plural ending, assuming that the form you're looking for is masculine plural. Put a kamatz under the middle consonant of the root, and a shavah under the first consonant of the root. Same thing would be true of na'ar, boy or lad. You add your plural ending, hirik yod mem, put a kamatz under the middle consonant of the root, put a shavah under the first consonant of the root. So shavah, kamatz, and then plural ending. Same thing with eretz, although the complication here is that eretz, even though it doesn't look it, is actually feminine, and it shows up as feminine in the plural. So instead of putting a hirik yod mem plural ending, you put an ot plural ending, the feminine plural ending. But you do the same thing. You put a shavah under the aleph. Now, of course, aleph cannot take, it's a weak letter, cannot support a simple vocal shavah. And so instead it becomes a hataf patah, half shavah. And then the kamatz under the second consonant. And so it still follows the same pattern. Shavah, kamatz, plural ending. And that's how you make a sigilate noun plural. I move on to section 8.3 on certain monosyllabic nouns. Certain monosyllabic nouns, that is, nouns that are just one syllable, will have unchangeably long vowels, like sus, where when you add the plural endings or even feminine endings, it doesn't change the root at all. So sus, just add the plural ending, susim, there's nothing, no sere or kamatz to reduce, so that doesn't come into play. And even when you turn a horse into a mare, add a kamatz hey feminine ending, and add the ot feminine plural ending, and that's very simple. However, other words are different. Some words are geminants. Geminants means that the second letter, Hebrew words usually have roots that consist of 3 consonants, but you don't always see the consonants in a word that's before you. It turns out, for example, with the word people, that the root is ayin, mem, mem. And in your dictionary, the Brown Driver Briggs dictionary, it'll actually list all the nouns under their roots. So you'd actually look this one up under ayin, mem, mem. But you see that it's a geminate with the second and third consonant of the root being the same in the plural, where though the singular is the plural is meme with 2 mems, shown by the dagesh forte in the mem. And so that would be a plural of a geminate noun, an A-class kind of geminate noun. Another geminate is the word statute, which is hok. And when you make it plural, you end up with the form hukim, where it goes from a long O to a short U. O's and U's can interchange in this language quite a bit. but it shows itself to be a geminate because in the plural you get a doubling of the middle consonant. So you get hukim with two Q's, with two kos, as opposed to the one that shows up when the form is masculine singular. Now, in some other geminate nouns, you're going to get compensatory lengthening because you're unable to double the middle consonant. So here you have ra, which means bad or evil. And it happens to be a geminate. The root is resh ayin. But when you try to double the ayin, you can't. And so instead you will compensatory lengthen from a short a patah to a long a kamatz. So ra becomes ra'im in the plural with a kamatz, a long a, as opposed to the short a. And all the other forms, the feminine singular and the feminine plural, all behave in the same way. And then he also gives you the word for brother, and you can't double the het. It looks like it's probably a geminate, but because you can't double the het and hays tend to virtual double rather than compensatory lengthen, and so you put the patah there, you pretend you've doubled it, even though you really haven't, and add your heric yod mem ending, and brothers becomes achim instead of ah. So that's certain monosyllabic nouns. I move on to another preposition, preposition mean. Preposition mean means from. Can mean separated from or away from, either way. And it can be, it's kind of half and half between regular prepositions that are always separate and the inseparables like la and ka and ba, which are attached to the word that follows. Preposition mean can do both. So you can make it separate from the word. So if you want to say from the city, you could say min ha'ir. Here it happens to have a makef. You wouldn't necessarily have to have a makef, though typically it will have the makef. However, in some cases, the noon is going to assimilate. And so let's say you want to say from a king. Well, you could write it as we see up above, min melech, and make them entirely separate words. But when you put the noon and the mem together, well, the noon is kind of like a chameleon. It likes to imitate whatever it pushes up against. And so what happens is that you get, instead of getting min melech, it ends up being pronounced mim melech. And then instead of writing the mem twice, you just write it once, put a dog h in it, and you get a min melech. But if you were to magnify this mem with the dog h in it and put it under a electron microscope, you would see that that little dot in the mem is really your noon that's assimilated. So this is a case where the mem becomes not separated, but actually attached to the word that follows. Now, it depends on what the letter is. For strong letters, it'll tend to assimilate. If you have a letter like a yod, well, you have Yehuda with a shavah. We have the same sort of thing. The noon assimilates into the yod, but then by the Schimann-Levy rule that we mentioned in passing, it'll lose its gemination, it'll lose its doubling, and the shavah will go away, and it becomes Mihuda from Judah, The noon assimilated, but then it disappeared as you simplified